iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max can finally shoot in Apple log format, reducing gross over-sharpening and irritating tone mapping and giving you more cinematic and true-to-life footage. You can record it internally in ProRes with a standard camera app at up to 4K 30 or externally to an SSD or an SD card thanks to USB-C 3.0 port, or you can use a free app, Blackmagic Camera, that can record in different flavors of ProRes in Apple log format and even 4K 60p internally, but also in more compressed HEVC or H.265 and H.264 codecs to save up a ton of storage. Today we are comparing standard camera app video shooting with Apple log in good lighting conditions, in low light and in studio lighting, with Apple log converted to Rec. 709 both in standard camera app and also with Blackmagic Camera app, in all varieties of ProRes and HEVC codecs, and even Apple log versus mirrorless APS-C cinema camera Sony FX30. All you need to know about Apple log filming with iPhone 15 Pro Max. Make sure you watch this video on the biggest and the best screen available. It's about to get nerdy, guys. Let's go. What's good, guys? My name is Oleg Nikitin and you're watching No Limits On channel. All the samples in this video are shot with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Apple log will be on the right side and the standard camera app with no log on the left side. I have also uploaded 4 different scenes with different lighting conditions to a cloud so you can download those files and try to color correct log and compare it to standard footage yourself. And also I've uploaded a high quality version of this particular video to a cloud so you can rewatch this video without YouTube's compression. The link is in the description. So guys, here is how it looks in log, and then we are correcting it to Rec. 709. And then my friend also did this grade, kind of a cinematic grade, and also he has reduced the moire effect. I'll talk about it in a second. So how do you convert log? In the description I'll leave a lot from Apple that turns your log to Rec. 709. You just set the input to Rec. 2020 and you get more or less contrasty and saturated image. I've just tweaked it a little bit to my taste. And as you can see, guys, the stock camera app in full auto mode gives you over sharpened, low contrast and super flat image, especially on my face. And if we zoom in to 100%, we can definitely tell the difference in terms of over sharpening and shadow detail. My face looks super flat on the standard camera app without log, but with log we get more cinematic image, as you can see right here. Of course, guys, you can try to fix the standard camera app and to add Gaussian blur to reduce over sharpening, crush the shadows a little bit and tweak the colors, but all in all I would still prefer the log footage on the right. And if we zoom in 400% with Gaussian blur, we get much less detail, more blocky colors. You can also download this footage and try to tweak it yourself and see the difference. And guys, pay attention to the moire effect on my shirt, kind of colorful lines that are jumping all around. This is happening because of the 48 megapixel main sensor on the iPhone, and I guess we have some pixel binning when shooting video. It happens both in standard camera app and when you're shooting log through Blackmagic Cam app, so keep that in mind and try not to shoot objects with a lot of texture. Now let's have a look at how Apple log looks outdoors with good lighting conditions. So here it is, graded. Apple log turned into Rec. 709 and I was using Blackmagic Camera app 4K 30 ProRes 422. In Blackmagic Camera app you can upload your own LUTs, and I will leave a link to the Apple LUT and to my favorite LUT to expose this log footage correctly in the description below. And as you can tell, guys, the Apple LUT looks a bit overexposed. So let me pick another LUT from Alistair Chapman at -3 stops of exposure. And as you can see, guys, with this LUT we get much more naturally looking image. And pay attention to the histogram. The image sits right in between the underexposed and overexposed parts. And if we turn off the LUT, we can see that the histogram doesn't change. We turn it back on and it's still not changed, but we can see the image detail in the sky. Now let's try to raise the exposure, and as you can see, the histogram moves a little bit and it looks like the sky is overexposed now, but through the histogram I can tell that it's not overexposed. So let's record a little portion of the video and try to play it back. So when we play it back, we can still see the detail in the sky. So be careful with exposing your footage in Blackmagic Camera app. I think we'll need to develop a new LUT. I will let you know when we do that to expose your footage the best. So now let's have a look at the stock camera app without log on the left and on the log shot with Blackmagic Camera in ProRes 422. Let's zoom in 400% and you can definitely tell the difference in terms of over sharpening. The image on the left looks gross in my opinion. This micro contrast ruins the image. And here is ProRes 4444, which Blackmagic Cam allows you to shoot in. So now on the left you can see the Apple log shot with standard camera app in 4K 30 ProRes, and on the right ProRes 4444 shot with Blackmagic camera. And when we zoom in 400%, the ProRes 4444 looks a touch more sharp, so Blackmagic did a great job with their app. And here are different codecs with Blackmagic Cam app: HEVC or H.265 at the left, ProRes LT, ProRes 422 HQ, and ProRes 4444. And in my opinion, guys, it looks really close to each other. And speaking of H.265 codec, in ProRes LT we can record for 2 hours, but when we switch to HEVC or H.265, we can now record for 18 hours. So it's 9 times less storage space for HEVC. Great. And we can still shoot in log in HEVC. On the left we have standard camera app, no log, no corrections, and on the right we have log to Rec 709 with HEVC H.265 codec. And when we zoom in 400%, you can definitely tell that HEVC looks a ton better without this annoying over sharpening and moire. So now guys, let's have a look at different cameras. So before we were shooting with 1x camera, now let's try 0.5x camera, 13mm full frame equivalent. And as you can see, 0.5x camera has the same issues in standard app without shooting in log. Same over sharpening and a bit worse dynamic range. So let's zoom in 400% and you'll see that we have more shadow detail in the log footage and less over sharpening. But the real sharpness, the real detail is more or less the same. Now let's switch to 2x camera. There is a caveat because Blackmagic Camera app doesn't have a proper 2x camera mode. You have to crop in digitally through the Blackmagic Camera app. But as you can tell guys, the quality is pretty good. So let's zoom in 400% and you'll see that even though we have lifted the shadows on the left image by 10%, it is still crushed in the trunk of the tree. But with log, we still retain a lot of detail and we still retain those shadows. When we switch to 5x camera, which is for iPhone 15 Pro Max only, we have the same story right here. Same over sharpening on the left. Don't forget that you can add sharpness in post to your log footage if you want to. But now let's zoom in and have a look at the detail. So as you can tell guys, the shadow detail is more or less the same, but the highlights are blown out on the left image. The log footage is a tiny bit more noisy, but you can of course reduce this noise through neat video or something else in post. So let's try to pull down the highlights on the left image, and as you can tell, there is no detail in the boat. But with the log footage, we do retain the detail in the boat. So it means that maybe it's a bit better in terms of dynamic range. We'll talk about it in a minute. So here is the selfie camera if you're interested in shooting with your selfie camera in Apple Log, and I would definitely pick Apple Log for shooting selfies. And here are some samples with my skin tone so you can have better understanding of skin tone reproduction and all in all shadow detail and shapes of those shadows on my face. And as you can tell, log footage looks a lot more natural. So now we're in 2x camera mode and let's try to match those images by tweaking the image on the left. So here it is with Gaussian blur at 2 points and with some color grading to lower the shadows to add a little bit of shape and color grade it a bit. But as you can see guys, with Gaussian blur we do lose a lot of detail, so it's not the best way to reduce over sharpening. And if we get rid of Gaussian blur, it's getting too sharp, over sharpened. So log is winning in this regard, at least in my opinion. And here is the 5x camera guys, and by the way, you even get some background blur, the natural optical background blur with your 5x camera. And here is the comparison with the stock camera with no log. I even tried to shoot log with action mode with the standard camera app of course, and the resolution dropped to 2.8K. And as you can tell guys, the over sharpening effect on the non-log mode is getting even worse. And the 5x action mode is doing some magic, to be honest. Just look at this stability compared to this footage when I was really actually shooting this. So if you want to shoot action mode, use log as well. Unfortunately, cinematic mode does not support log shooting. It's a bummer to me because I love cinematic mode if you use it correctly and properly, but if you use it like so at f2, digital blur is not the best. It still has issues with detaching me from the background, especially around my ears and my hair. but I have a separate 2 huge tutorial videos about cinematic mode and how to use it from Morocco and from Georgia. So if you want to learn more about using cinematic mode and getting the best results, I'll leave the links to those 2 videos in the description below. So now a few words about the tone mapping. So tone mapping makes your image look brighter in certain parts and darker in certain parts, and it's not working in Apple Log, which is great. So as you can see, when we move the camera decides what to make brighter and what to make darker. So let's fix and lock the auto exposure and autofocus, and I'm rotating the ND filter. But when I stop rotating the filter, the image changes its exposure, not to overexpose the skies. And it's not what I want to see. I even tried to pull off the filter completely, so the image should look blown out, but it's still retaining the detail in the sky, so you cannot set manual exposure, it always tries to fix it in some way. And shooting in log fixes this issue. And now guys, we're using Sony FX30 with Tamron 17-70 f2.8 lens in S-Log3 S-GAN 3 Cine. Now let's turn it into Rec 709, and let me tell you guys, it doesn't look that bad. Of course, when we zoom in for 100%, we can definitely tell that Sony has a lot more detail in the leaves and all around, more sharpness, more detail, but the iPhone is looking not that bad. Now let's try 5x camera and also the 70mm on a crop sensor camera plus clear image zoom at 1.2x, so it's more or less 120mm full frame equivalent. And it doesn't look that bad as well on the iPhone. Of course it's more noisy, of course it's not that sharp, but still guys, it's a proper cinema camera. And here is the difference of background blur with a 70mm f2.8 lens compared to 5x cam. Of course you do get a lot more background separation with the APS-C camera. I plan on doing a full comparison of the iPhone with the FX30, so subscribe for that and stay tuned. So now guys, let's have a look at the dynamic range of Apple Log. In this case, I have slightly overexposed the image, and that is why on the building, the white one, we don't have image detail. In this regard, Stock Camera app did a great job, and I had to work with my exposure in a better way. So after grading, we tried to pull off the whites, but it's just gone. It's blown out on the building on the left side of the image. But the shadows look better and the over sharpening does look worse on the left image. So now let's get to the 5x camera, and here I have exposed a little lower, so I have retained the image and the detail on the building on the left, but the shadows now look a bit darker, but still we have the same great detail without gross over sharpening. One more really high dynamic range scene with both bright highlights and lower shadows, and I have color graded both images to pull the shadows and lower the highlights, and it looks more or less similar on this size of the picture. But when we zoom in 200%, we can definitely tell that the image in log looks a bit sharper and it has less noise reduction artifacts, kind of blocks of color that are dancing in the left corner of the image. And one more test, the sun is right behind that tree. I've tried to color grade both images as well, and when we try to pull the shadows on the non-log image, we see the blocks of noise reduction on the leaves right here on the bush in front of me. But in Apple Log, it looks more or less clean. Nice work, Apple. So if you have a very high dynamic range scene, shooting in log is a great idea, but keep the eye on your exposure. Do not overexpose your image.
And right now guys, I'm recording in Apple Log into the standard camera app in 4K 30 frames per second, and sun sometimes shines onto my face. So how do you like the footage and the sound quality as well? And now guys, I'm with 5x camera on iPhone 15 Pro Max. I'm not sure if I'm in frame, so maybe I'm not. But here's what you get with the 5x camera.
So now guys, let's get to the low light test. On the right we have the image in log, 1/60th shutter, f1.8 and ISO 400 in ProRes 422. And let me tell you guys that the image on the left looks more pleasing because we have very slow shutter speeds, because it's a static image. And when we zoom in, we do have more noise on the log image, but also less over sharpening, which is good in my opinion. Now let's have a look at 0.5x camera. Of course, it's not the best idea to shoot with 0.5x camera. We have to raise up the ISO till 600 ISO with my log footage on the right. And when we zoom in, we do get more noisy image on the right, but still we retain a bit more detail because noise reduction on the standard camera is getting really aggressive. Now let's switch to 5x camera, which looks not that bad to be honest. That image on the left once again looks a bit cleaner, but more noise reduction. Image on the right looks a bit better in terms of detail at ISO 600, but all in all I would not recommend shooting with any camera but 1x in low light. Now let's have a look at HEVC log on the left and ProRes 422 log on the right. And to be fair, I don't see a dramatic difference. HEVC does have slightly more noise reduction, but the detail level is really comparable. And considering the size difference that is more than 10 times, I would stick to the HEVC because my computer can easily handle it. Here's the skin tone comparison with no log on the left and log on the right. And as you can see, my face is getting really pinkish and flat on the left. HEVC on the left and ProRes 422 on the right, both in log. No real difference. Stick to the H.265 if your computer can handle it. Now let's test the stabilization, and the stabilization in Blackmagic Camera app is getting 3 different values, like 3 different steps. Standard, more active and the best one, but you do have a little lag and delay in your image and it's not as smooth as the stock camera stabilization, of course. But we do get this effect of ghosting when you move too fast because your shutter speed is getting really slow and you get this doubling effect in the trees, especially on 0.5x camera, so keep that in mind. And I would not suggest one more time shooting with anything but 1x camera in low light. Log is okay if you want to denoise the footage in post. So one more time, stock camera and log. And now on the left we have Sony FX30 with f1.4 lens at ISO 10000, also graded, and it's not looking that much better, to be honest. And one more example with Sony FX30, you can definitely see the difference in low light. Also, my friends, don't forget that you can use something like Dehancer plugin to emulate film with your log footage and get really outstanding and nicely looking images. I have a huge tutorial on how to make your iPhone footage look better with Dehancer plugin emulating film, so if you're interested, I'll leave a link down below. It's shot in beautiful Georgia. Also guys, I did 2 overheating tests. The first one was 30 minutes of 4K 60 recording in ProRes LT in log via Blackmagic Camera app. I had no overheating. I lost 10% of battery, the phone was warm, but there was 0 issues. The second test was 70 minutes in 4K 60 HEVC H.265 codec via Blackmagic Camera app. The phone was charging simultaneously, it had no overheating, it was pretty warm to the touch, but had 0 issues. So this is a very stable way of recording video, and you can easily use this iPhone like a third camera in your interview setup. So guys, to conclude, I'm really happy with what Apple gave us with a new generation of Pro iPhones. The image quality is now much closer to proper cameras. We don't get this horrible over-sharpening, no more flat and orange faces or pinkish faces, no more unpredictable tone mapping, good dynamic range, less noise reduction, and thus more opportunities to get cleaner image if you denoise it in post yourself. Also less noise reduction, blocky artifacts, more creative freedom, and great codec options in the free app by Blackmagic. In good lighting conditions, it's a great filmmaking tool to have in your pocket at all times. I even plan on filming some of my gear reviews entirely on the iPhone 15 Pro Max in log. Of course, in lower lighting conditions, things get a little more challenging, and I would suggest using only the 1x camera in low light. To be honest guys, I'm impressed. So what do you think? Is iPhone getting really close to mirrorless cameras now? And will you be shooting in Apple Log now? Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you did find this video helpful, please smash the like and subscribe buttons and the notifications bell. Here is a video tutorial about making your iPhone footage look like it's shot on film for you to watch next. Take care, bye.